Hello ladies and gentle ladies, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for Fabric 1.21. And in this tutorial we are going to be creating custom enchantments. So I know in the previous tutorial I said we would be continuing with the trees. However, some stuff has come up and I really just haven't had time to record the other tree videos. So we are going to be doing enchantments instead, which have been highly requested anyway. So I figured we might as well do these, and they are a little bit complicated too. So we'll get these over and done, and then hopefully the next tutorial will be trees, as long as nothing else comes up. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we are going to go ahead and do is create a new class inside of our init package, and this is going to be our enchantment init. Inside of here, we are first going to want to create a registry key for our enchantment. So let's go with a public static final registry key of type enchantment. We are just going to call this example underscore enchantment underscore key. And then I'm going to set this equal to registry key dot of. We're going to pass in the registry keys type. So we're going to say registry keys dot enchantment, and then we're going to use tutorial mod dot id, and we're going to give it the name of our enchantment. So I'm just going to call this example. Now, instead of calling this example, like I have done with basically everything else, I'm actually going to give this enchantment a name. And that's just because it looks a little bit nicer in the game when we do this. So the enchantment that we're going to be creating in this tutorial is just a very basic lightning enchantment. So you attack an entity and it will strike it with lightning. Based on the levels, it will strike it with more lightning bolts. If you're wondering, I have just got this from the Fabric example mod, so we're not really doing anything special here, but hopefully I can explain how this stuff all works a little bit better. So we are actually going to name these things a little bit more proper. So instead of calling this example enchantment key, I'm actually just going to call this thundering key, and we're going to set the ID here to just thundering. Effectively the exact same, but just a proper name. Then what we're going to need to do is create our init method as we usually do. So we're going to go with a public static void load. And that will just be an empty method like that. And then we're also going to want a register method. So let's make this a private static, and this is going to be generic as usual. So we're going to say t extends enchantment entity effect, and this will return a map codec of type t. We can go ahead and call this register. And what we're going to pass in here is a string name, and then it's going to pass in this map codec of type t, which will be the codec. What we're going to do in here is return registry dot register. Remember, this is registry from net.minecraft.registry, and then we're going to pass in registries dot enchantment entity effect type, and then we're going to say tutorial mod dot id. We're going to pass in the name, and then finally we're going to pass in the codec. So then we can go ahead and actually create our codec here, or the field for the codec. So that will be a public static final map codec. So effectively the way that enchantments work in 1.21 is enchantments can have an effect applied to them, and this effect can be based off certain conditions. So what we need to go ahead and have is a effect for our enchantment. Now our enchantment is going to strike lightning, so what we're going to have is a lightning enchantment effect, and that will be the type that our map codec is. And this will take in certain data that will depend on the specific enchantment. So for example, this effect is going to depend on the level of the enchantment, and so this codec will basically rely on the specific level that the enchantment has. You'll see this more in a second when we actually go ahead and create this class, but just note for now that enchantments need to have an effect that is mapped to them, and this map codec will basically be used to serialize and deserialize the data that effect requires. So let's go ahead and call this lightning underscore effect. And do note, you are creating these effects, but they are not specific to a exact enchantment. So what you can go ahead and do is you can basically reuse these effects for different enchantments that you create, and you can also just use vanilla effects as well. So there are lots of different vanilla effects that you could reuse for yours, and we'll go through those a little bit later. And this will just be set to register. We're going to create a name, so I'm just going to call this one lightning, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say lightning enchantment effect dot codec, and we'll go ahead and create this class now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new package, and I'm just going to call this enchantments, and then inside of there I'm going to create another package which will be for the effects. And you do need to make sure that these are two separate packages, by the way, so just make sure that they are separate packages and it's not just called enchantments.effects, because that won't work. Okay, so once we've created this class, we can go ahead and implement the enchantment entity effect class, and then we need to make this class a record as well. And inside of the record parameters, we need to go ahead and add in an enchantment level based value, which will be the level. Okay, and then what we need to go ahead and do is implement the methods that it wants, which is going to be apply and also get codec. So we can go ahead and add those. And this apply method will effectively be how we determine what we should actually do when our effect is applied. So let's first go ahead and create this codec, and then we'll move on to the apply method and we'll create the logic that we want. So for the codec, this is going to need to be a public static final map codec of type lightning enchantment effect, and we're just going to call this codec. That will be set to a record codec builder, since this class is a record, as you can see, and we're going to say .map codec. Now this is going to take in the actual record instance, so we're going to say the instance, and then what we're going to say is instance.group, and in the group we can supply our fields. So we're going to say enchantment level based value dot codec dot field of, and we're going to just call this the amount, and we're going to say dot for getter, and we're going to say lightning enchantment effect amount, which is this parameter that we created in our record up here. So whatever you called this, it doesn't really matter what you called it. I've just called mine amount, but you need to make sure that these are the exact same name here and here, otherwise that might not work. And then all we need to go ahead and do is call .apply, and we can apply that to the instance, and then we can also say lightning enchantment effect new. So once we have done that in our get codec method, we can just go ahead and return that in there. And let's make sure we go ahead and import this class inside of our enchantment init as well. And before we forget, let's also go into our main class and let's go ahead and make sure that this is loaded. So enchantment init.load. Okay, so now we can move on to our apply method. So inside of this apply method, you can do effectively whatever you want. So the first thing I am going to do is this entity here. I'm going to rename this to the target. So since that's actually going to be the target entity, and then what we can do is just say if target is instance of a living entity, since we don't want to apply this to non-living entities, and I will just call that living. And what we can also do is we can also use the context to get the owner, which will effectively be the user. And if you want, you can check that this is a player. So we could check that it's instance of a player entity, which would get you the player like that. And then what you can do is effectively do whatever you want with this. So you can, you know, summon pigs. Maybe you want to cause some world event. Maybe you want to spawn in a structure. Maybe you want to place a bunch of blocks. Maybe you want to destroy a bunch of blocks. Maybe you want to create an explosion. There's all these different things that you could go ahead and do. As I said, we're just going to summon a lightning bolt based on the level. So there'll be a certain number of lightning bolts based on whatever level of enchantment we are at. So all we need to go ahead and do is say int number of strikes, And I'm just going to set that to this dot amount, and we're going to say get value, which will be the level, which is the integer that we passed in there. And you'll see that's actually a float, not an int, but that doesn't really matter because it will always be an int technically. And then we're just going to grab the block pos. So we're going to say block pos target position, and I'm going to set that equal to living.get block pos. And we're going to import block pos as well. And then all we need to do is just a simple for I loop. So we'll say less than number of strikes, and effectively we'll just spawn a lightning bolt. So we'll say entity type dot lightning bolt dot spawn. We're going to pass in the world. Then we're going to pass in the target position, and then we're just going to pass in the spawn reason, which is just triggered since we're triggering this from an enchantment. You'll see that we're not actually using our player here, so we don't need that. But obviously, if you did want to do something based on the player, then you would need to use that as well. Now, if you're curious how to do anything different than this, maybe you don't want to do something when you attack an entity, maybe you want to do something for something else, then you would need to go ahead and basically look at the vanilla implementations. That's going to be your best bet for creating enchantments, is just to look at vanilla. So if you go into the enchantment entity effect, and then you go into enchantment location based effect, you can right click this class and say go to implementations, and that will just show you all of the vanilla implementations of the enchantment effects. So you see, for example, there is explode enchantment effect. You have stuff like replace disk enchantment effect. I don't know exactly what that does, but it obviously does something. You have run function enchantment effect. I'm actually quite curious what this is. I'm actually not sure what this replace disk enchantment effect is, but the point is that you can see all of these different things that you could theoretically pass into here, and you can also then obviously need to add them to your codec up here, but then you do your logic inside your apply function here, and that will use obviously all of these values from there. So you see there's a bunch of different things you can use, and you've got like run function as well, which allows you to do basically run a command. There's all these cool different things that you could do. As you see, ours is very simple in reality, and we're not really doing anything complicated, but hopefully it should get you on the right track to create whatever you want to make. So once we're done with that, we need to actually go ahead and create the actual enchantment itself, since all we've done here is created the effect. So enchantments as of 1.21 are created using JSON. So that means we need to go ahead and either create the JSON manually, or what we're going to do is we're going to create the actual data generator. So let's go into our data package. Let's go into the generator package, and let's create a new class. And this will be the tutorial mod enchantment generator. This is going to extend Fabric Dynamic Registry Provider, and we're going to go ahead and implement these methods and then also add the constructor. So in the get name, we're just going to say tutorial mod dash enchantment generator. So that's going to be effectively be the exact same as our world generator. In fact, in here, we didn't even say that we're from the tutorial mod. So let's go ahead and remove that from there as well, just to keep some consistency with that. It doesn't really matter, but we just want to have some sort of consistency there. So let's first go ahead and create a register method, which will help us out a little bit. So this will be a private static void, and I'm going to call this register. We're going to take in an entries, which is from Fabric Dynamic Registry Provider. Then we are going to take in a registry key of type enchantment. Then we're going to take in an enchantment.builder, and then we're going to take in a resource condition ... And then all we need to do is say entries.add. We're going to add the key, and we're going to say builder.build, which will take in the key.getValue, and then we're going to do the resource conditions. Okay, so inside of configure, the first thing that we're going to need to go ahead and do is actually create an item lookup so that we can go ahead and get a lookup, and you'll see what that's for in a second. So let's create a registry wrapper of type item, and this will be called our item lookup. And I'm just going to set this to registries.getWrapper or throw, and we're going to say registry keys item. Then we are just going to call the register method. We're going to pass in our entries. Then we're going to need to pass in the registry key for our enchantment. So let's go to enchantment init.thundering key. Then we're going to do enchantment.builder. And inside of here, we're going to need to create an enchantment definition. So let's say enchantment.definition. And inside of here, we first need to go ahead and provide the list of supported items that this enchantment can have. And the way that we usually do this is effectively using tags. So we use our item lookup to go ahead and look up a tag, and that will grab us a bunch of registry keys that match the items that should allow this enchantment to be applied to them. So we're going to say item lookup dot get or throw, and we're just going to pass in item tags weapon enchantable, because we want this to apply to any weapons that are enchantable. If you wanted it to only apply to pickaxes, then you would say something like mining enchantable, or mining loot enchantable, or, you know, trident enchantable, you have fishing enchantable, you have armor enchantable, all these kind of things. So you can use any of those tags you want, or alternatively, obviously you can create your own tag, or you could just use any tag from here that you want, really. It doesn't really matter, whichever one just suits you the best. We are going to be sticking with weapon enchantable though, because we want this to be able to apply to weapons. The next thing is going to be the weight. So effectively, this is going to be the probability of this enchantment showing up in the enchantment table. And I just find a good value for this is around 10. So you can go like plus or minus 2 or 3. I'm going to give it like 15, which is somewhat high. But I think we want to be able to find this relatively easily, at least for testing. And you can obviously then tune it down afterwards if you think it's too high. So I'm just going to set that to 15, and I am going to add a quick comment here and just say that this is the probability of showing up in the enchantment table, just so that we can, if we ever look back on this, we know what that number is for. Then we have the max level of this enchantment. I'm going to give this a max level of 5. Once again, I'm just going to add a comment there. Next, we're going to have the cost per level, which will start effectively with the base level. So we're going to say enchantment dot leveled cost, and the base is going to be 1, and then per level we're just going to add effectively 10, and then we're going to do the exact same thing for the max level as well. So we're going to say enchantment dot leveled cost. The base, once again, I'm going to put as 1, and then the per level I'm going to put as 15. So I'm just going to go ahead and once again comment these. Next, we have the cost for applying this enchantment in an anvil. I'm just going to say a cost of 7. Once again, I'm going to add a quick comment. And then finally, we need to say the specific attribute modifier slot that this needs to be applied to. So we're going to say attribute modifier slot. And for us, that is going to be the hand. But you'll see you can also choose, for example, the chest, the feet, the heads, the legs, the main hand, off hand, all those kind of things. I'm just going to say the hand. Next, we can go ahead and add our actual effect. So we can say .add effect, and we're going to pass in the actual effect type first of all. So we're going to say enchantment effect component types. And you see there are all these different types of effects that you could apply. The one we're going to be using is post attack. So think of this like an event. So this effect will fire on this specific event, and that is when our enchantment effect will be applied. So we want ours to apply post attack so that our context will be suited around an attack event and not something else like fishing or mining. So we are going to use post attack for that. Then we are going to need to provide the target. So that will be the enchantment effect target. And we're going to say .attacker. And then we're going to say the victim as effectively the user of the enchantment. Then we are actually going to need to construct our enchantment effect. So we're going to use a new lightning enchantment effect. And in here, we need to provide our level-based value. So we can say enchantment level-based value. And here you can choose to use your specific function for this. So you can choose a linear, with a per level above the first level value, and you can choose to use a constant, or you can use a clamped or a fraction, level squared, all these different ones if you construct these yourself. We are just going to be using a linear though, so that it is nice and simple. So we're going to provide the base, which I'm going to say is about like 0.5 maybe, and then for each level above, I'm going to say maybe around 0.15, like that, which will just keep that nice and simple. So once you have done all of that, you can go ahead and register your enchantment generator. So we can go into our data generator class and say pack.addProvider, and we can use our new generator in here. And then finally, we need to go ahead and add our enchantment to the lang. So that's going to be nice and simple. So we'll go into our provider and we'll come down here and we'll just say translation builder, add enchantment, and we're going to say enchantment init, thundering key, and we're just going to call this thundering. And obviously, if you're not using Datagen, then you just need to add into your lang file enchantment.tutorialmod.thundering, and that would go ahead and add that correctly. And now we can go ahead and run our Datagen. So we're going to use the run Datagen configuration. And once that has completed, you'll see it should have modified 2 files, and then we can go ahead and run the game, and hopefully our enchantment should be in. So if we go into the creative menu and we go ahead and search for enchantment, and you can obviously look through these manually if you want, but you see at the end we have our thundering one. We can also just search for thundering and that will come up in there, and you'll see we have all 5 levels since we've registered 5 levels. So let's have level 1. We're also going to try 3, and then we'll also try 5, and I'm just going to apply them to some tools here. So I'm going to say thundering 5 maybe there. I'm going to say maybe thundering 1 on the axe, and maybe thundering 3 on the diamond sword. Okay, so we have a sheep here. So if we go ahead and hit it with the axe, you'll see that there is 1 lightning bolt, and boom, that's it. So if we then use the sword, and we'll find something to use it on, and there should have been 3 lightning bolts. It's actually quite hard to tell whether or not there's 3, but there should be. And then finally, if we use our sword here, we should have 5 lightning bolts, and you'll see there were definitely more than 1. It is hard to tell exactly how many there are there, but there should have actually been 5, since that's what we told it to do. So that is going to be it for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please do be sure to give it a like and subscribe. I know this wasn't the tutorial that a lot of people wanted today. We should have had trees really, but I just have been kind of caught up with a lot of other stuff, and also it's been quite hot, so I haven't been able to record and research a bunch into trees yet. Hopefully that will be coming up on Thursday, but I can't guarantee anything. If not, there will still be a video on Thursday. It might just be something a little bit smaller in the meantime, but hopefully it will be trees, and then we can move on to block entities, since that's what you guys have been requesting the most. If you have any problems with this tutorial, obviously you can join my Discord, which is linked in the description below, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.